Understanding the cross, the power of the cross. The cross of Christ stands at the heart of our Christian faith. Without it, we have no faith, and apart from the truth of it, Christianity becomes only another philosophy of life, a matter of words and ideas. Jesus did not come to give us another set of ideas about God. Rather, he came to die for us. The idea of the cross emphasized the need for absolute commitment to the life of the kingdom. He already knew within himself what it meant to take up the cross, and he wanted the disciple to take up their own cross and follow him. The agony of death. There is no virtue in highlighting the pain and horror of the cross for its own sake, but we do need to enter into the reality of Christ's suffering to some degree if we are ever to appreciate, firstly, what it meant for God to save us through the cross, and secondly, what God has accomplished for every one of us in the death of Jesus. We have lived for so long with a domesticated idea of the cross. We have refined it of its horror, and in doing that, we have robbed it of its power. The Holy Spirit wants us to know the importance of Christ's sacrifice because this work of the cross should be central to our lives and ministry. The scriptures hide nothing of the shame and agony that was involved for God's beloved Son. It is not simply the fact that he died that is important. How he died has the greatest significance for every one of us. The Old Testament prophecies concerning the death of Christ put the same emphasis on the details of his sufferings. In the church at large, we have brought Jesus down to our size and we have diminished his death to dimensions that we can handle spiritually, emotionally, and theologically. If we felt the deep horror of the cross, we would know the full extent of our sin, and this is what we recoil from within the deeper reaches of our hearts and minds. What happened that day at Calvary was not pretty. There was no sentiment in a Roman scourging, and Roman crucifixion has been universally recognized as being the most cruel form of public execution ever devised. It was a horrific, slow, painful, and humiliating death. We need to see the depth of Calvary. We need to see that everything we can have or be flows out of this act of love. More than that, we need to recognize that if we are to live for God, then we need to walk the same way ourselves. The power of the cross. Jesus did not undergo a normal, routine crucifixion. He was also subjected to the public humiliation of a mock trial before Pontius Pilate, during which he was abused, beaten, and disfigured. His beard was torn out, and a crown of thorns was placed on his head as a gesture of mockery at his claim to be a king. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he had faced the awful truth that this cup was his cup and it could be drunk by no one else. The pressure within himself was so intense that he bled from his brow. When the soldiers came to Jesus on the cross, they saw that he was dead already. So they did not break his leg. Instead, they pierced his side and blood and water gushed out. This means that Jesus had died literally of a broken heart. His heart had burst and the blood had congealed. The blood and plasma had become separated, and when he was pierced, they flowed out from his side. We cannot begin to speak of his spiritual sufferings. These things are hidden from us because there is no way that we could ever comprehend what it meant for God's Son to be forsaken by his Father. The cry that tore from his lips, which echoed the words of Psalm chapter 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me?" contains depth of suffering that we will never be able to understand. But we must see that none of these things were by chance. Man took him were not in charge of the proceeding that day. This is the awesome truth of Calvary. God the Father was in control. The Father was offering up his Son for every soul of man. Recoil from the fact because it only serves to underline even more clearly the extent of our guilt. God, in some mysterious way, laid our guilt upon Jesus, and through his sufferings, we were set free. The power of the cross for us lies in the fact that every detail of the experience of Jesus in his sufferings has dynamic significance for us at every point of our need. Ever since the fall of man, Satan has kept man and woman under his oppression. They have been bound in chains of sin and sickness, depression and despair, which have been the hallmark of human experience. Man has become subject to every kind of suffering and affliction as a result of his disobedience to God. On the cross, every spiritual and emotional bondage, every affliction which Satan has brought to man through man's disobedience has been reversed in the power of Calvary. To God be the glory, God bless you.